My guest today is Barbara O Meara, visual artist based in Ireland. Barbara paints. She also works in print, textiles, and in installation art, and is a writer of both poetry and prose with a particular interest in contemporary Celtic shamanism. Barbara's studies of Celtic shamanism and ritual led to a deeper understanding of her own work. She described Celtic shamanism as being related to nature and a way of honoring oneself. It is a way of being rather than a philosophy or dogma. In the process of creation, she allows the work to emerge spontaneously. Her paintings are timeless, intuitive, and made in stillness. In her work, she brings light and healing to grief and traumas. She talked about how art impacts people when they get involved in creation and even sometimes helps them let go of pain. Barbara has experience working with the wider community and is also involved in art activism. She believes in empowering people, bringing out their own creativity and finding their own voices. We talked about her socially engaged projects. These include Stitches with Love to commemorate the tomb babies and her installation related to the smear test scandal in women's healthcare in Ireland. She has held various workshops over the years, such as art of journaling and abstraction work. She believes when your work is coming from truth, it finds its own way to connect with the hearts of people. We also talked about transitioning from artist to shaman and from shaman to artist. We reference some of her paintings toward the end. We start our conversation talking about Barbara's book, Soul Seers. You are a co-writer of Soul Seers, an Irish anthology of Celtic shamanism. What inspired you to write that book?
I've been painting for about 35 years, and I felt my work was very connected to nature and a timelessness. So about 10 years ago, I started studying academically Celtic shamanism and ritual and my own ancestry, just to sort of give me answers about my own work over the years. And I connected with Sliabh Cree, which is a shamanic centre in Ireland, and also with one of the founders of that, Karen Ward, who runs Moon Women's Circles. So we collaborated on a few art projects where she did healing rituals, and then we just decided that we would do a book. So we had 13 contributors who all had studied shamanism in some shape or form. And then my artwork accompanied the writing and poetry.
Your work is about Celtic shamanism. The first thing came to my mind was, what is Celtic shamanism? Because I read a bit about Celtic culture, but I didn't know that Ireland had a shaman. So could you talk about that?
Yes, so in Ireland, we wouldn't actually have called it a shaman. It would have been a wise person or a healer, be like in the sort of Druid tradition. But every culture would have a medicine person or a healing person. And so, like, I have been painting for a long time, the very same way, like I have a way of painting that didn't sort of fit into the norm. And when I decided to search out about ritual and that, this is what I came across. So it's not a religion. It's about sort of nature-based honoring of yourself, your intuition, the earth. It's very beautiful, actually, and anybody can do it. So it's about just ritual and being in ritual and being with the seasons of the year. So in Ireland, we would have, the winter solstice, summer solstice, Beowulf and Luna is coming up now on the 1st of August. So just honouring different festivals, a bit like the way farmers in the past would have a knowing about the land and an intuition. Well, it's just a way of being, really. So I'll tell you about how it is in my work. In my painting, I would have very particular ways of working that I would go into a very meditative state. I would have to work in all day. I would have an idea in my head about something that I want to work on. Maybe I have done a couple of weeks of reading or research about an issue, and then I would just start mixing paint and pouring, and I let the work evolve. I don't have a plan for the painting, so the work just decides what it is going to be, and I open up and allow for that. I try and stay out of thinking and my head and just go with my intuition. And often the next day I would go back to look at a piece of work and I wouldn't really even remember having created it. And I would very rarely change work, because I feel the work is coming out of a certain moment in time and a certain emotion. And to me, there's no mistakes, there's no way. So there's a timelessness about that. I'm not trying to control the painting.
Yeah.
So in the book, actually, the painting that's on the cover, I had actually painted very shortly after my father died, and it's a wolf, and he's gazing at me, and it was like a farewell painting to my father. And I never ever dreamed that it would become the cover of a book. So all things are very emotional, and they're very intuitive, and they're trying to connect with something timeless. I feel like when I'm painting, that time isn't linear, it's circular. So I feel I'm very connected to my ancient past and ancestry, um, and I just really, really let the work flow.
Was something that you always knew to just be still, or through time you get to that point?
I think for me, I always knew. I think from the time I was a very small child, I always felt a bit like a spider. I always liked solitude. I always felt this sort of ecstasy in nature, especially around water, being in water, and I knew I was an artist. Um, so I've always honoured that way of being, which was quite difficult at times when I was studying, studying art, because I couldn't conform. Not that you have to conform, but I couldn't even verbalize why I was painting like that. I just knew this is what I do, and I have to trust me. I can look at a painting that I did 30 years ago, and immediately I will know how I felt, what the work is about, even if it's an abstract piece, what the emotion is in it, what the whole the whole sort of essence of the work is. And I can look at all my paintings like that. And so I don't have a particular style either. So I'm very open to just experimenting and being very messy and allowing for the beauty of the paint to tell the story. And it sounds a bit airy fairy, but when I'm working, it just makes total sense.
Yeah.
And sometimes the painting appears, and I've no idea what it's about. And then a week later, I'll know something will happen, and there'll be a connection. Oh, this is what this work is.
Sometimes you know what's the emotion is involved when you create, and sometimes it's a kind of self-discovery. So after a week or a month, when you go back to the piece, you discover something about yourself.
Yes, and often I will work on two paintings at the same time, and one will maybe take more of my attention. So I will be actually focusing on pouring paint or that. And usually it's the other piece that I've sort of completely ignored, but I'm doing, is the one I'm just in awe of. I'm like, wow. So I just have to honor that this is me, this is who I am, and this is the way I work. And I think when I went back to study my own ancestry through sort of shamanic ritual and my Celtic heritage, that it just made sense. Now I know why I paint like that. I'm just tapping into this energy that's in me from, you know, prehistory. It's all my ancestors together. And sometimes I will dream about a color. I'll wake up and I'll just think I need to paint in red or something, and I'll just start. And I've no idea what's going to come out of the painting, but I just let it happen.
Wow. It's very interesting that in dreams sometimes you have some sort of guidance, or something comes to you and tell you, okay, work with the red color.
I think that's about trust as well.
But for me, it was so complicated. The piece was created in a dream that I couldn't feel I can really recreate that. Is that ever happened to you?
Yeah, I do think that if I do try to recreate or overthink, that it doesn't happen. The work doesn't happen. So definitely have to go, well, this is what, you know, the message I was given in the dream, but this is what's happening. So I'm going with what's happening. So I think being open, like having your heart wide open to allow what comes in to just come in. And I saw a documentary actually about Amy Winehouse the other night, and she was talking about her songwriting, and they were saying to her, like the record company were saying, but you know, this doesn't rhyme. And she just couldn't believe they said that, because she wrote what came out of her at that time with that feeling, and there was no way she was going to change lyrics to make them rhyme. And I feel like that about the paintings.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you don't feel you need to change it, you shouldn't change it.
Yeah. So it's a different way of painting too. I mean, I do love other ways of working, and I love other people's work, but this is just who I am and the way I work. And it took me a long time to sort of honor that. And that's where I think the ritual and the shamanic work, and actually in the shamanic work, it was all part of my own process of healing, because a lot of my work would be informed by grief and trauma. And issues that I see on the news that would affect me, but I would try and then do a painting that has some sort of healing in it. So I would start with a very traumatic issue, and I try and bring that to some sort of light or healing. And that was hence the picture of my dad, a beautiful blue wolf gazing back at me.
Yeah, you mentioned that creativity has a healing power. And what about people that they are not artists? How do they can apply what you do and just start working with a color or just drawing and heal through that? Do you have any suggestion?
Yes, I do teach, and I work a lot with community and art activism. So I think everybody is creative, and everybody is an artist to a certain degree. It's just then about training and practice and that. So I actually really believe in empowering people to bring out their own creativity. So I don't teach technique. So what I would be doing when I'm doing workshops or doing community art projects is allowing people to tap into their own energy and what they like and what comes out of them, and make them feel strong, and to honor that. The first thing everybody says is, oh, I can't draw and I can't do art. And so I like to make people confident about being creative. It's not about, showing their work in a huge gallery or that. It's about people tapping into their own feelings and creativity the way children do art. They don't care who's looking at them or what they're producing, and they absolutely love what they do. And then they might tear it up, and that's okay as well.
Yeah.
So I really do believe that art is very healing in giving people a voice where you may not have a voice in another way, that you can get this out in work. And I mean, it's healed me as well.
Yeah. You have a workshop called The Art of Soul Journaling. Journaling
Yes.
is something that everybody can do that. And I want you to talk about it.
Yeah, so that's a beautiful thing to journal. And I think when I was in art college, I loved my notebooks. I absolutely loved them, and they were just packed with things that I found beautiful, and from my own children's drawings to textiles to images in the paper to blobs of paint. So I think if you can create something that you want to keep going back to and looking at, and it's uplifting, and you've done it, I think that's just such a gift. So in the soul journals, I would teach people, like I love teaching in a simple way so that anybody can do it at home with the materials they have. So I would teach very simple mono printing and things like that. Also watercolors, where you're pouring and bleeding and using salt and that, so you're getting lovely abstract pieces with texture and color, and it's very freeing. And once people loosen up, they just take off, and I just stand back and watch. And it's not about whether I like what they're doing. It's they feel so empowered and love what they're doing. And most people that I do workshops with will go on to do their own level, whatever they're comfortable with, of creativity.
Do you ever had any memory of somebody's creating for the first time and something happened there, something like empowered that person, or something that is interesting to share?
Yeah, so I did work for years with a bereavement group for people who had been bereaved by homicide. So they had lost a loved one to homicide. And we did a lot of work, and a lot of them had never done art before. And it was deep work, but it had to be very carefully managed and in a safe space. So we did things like a memory box. And one woman who had never done art, was elderly, had lost a child. She started making these boxes, and she just made so many of them, and they were all absolutely beautiful. And it gave her a voice. And she said at the time it was the only time in her daily or weekly life that she could let go of the pain, that she wasn't thinking about it because she was creating.
Wow. I think even when you talking about this memory, even it happened in the past, I can feel the emotion in you, and then I can have that emotion in me. I mean,
yeah, and I think as artists, we have that empathy. It's not that we know how other people are feeling, but we have a sort of an empathy, creative empathy.
Yeah. And you bring that a lot in your work. I was looking at one of your projects you did with a blanket, baby blanket. You were talking about it, and I could see how you feel and your emotion, and it was very inspiring. How did you get people to work with you and create that blanket?
Thank you. So at the time, that was in the news headlines. I think it was around 2017. I was having an exhibition, a painting exhibition called Born, Babies of Ravaged Nations, about children all over the world who had particular stories that were in the media. And I was making Madonna and child paintings and putting the children back in the arms of their mothers to bring healing to these specific pieces. And the Tune Baby project was born from that, really, because it was in the news. And I asked some friends to knit a little white to represent a baby. And we had 8 of them because there were nearly 800 babies. So I had this tiny little blanket hanging in the exhibition. And we actually had a heat ceremony at that as well. Karen Ward performed with audience participation. And I realized that the women who knitted the squares did it immediately, and they all had them done in a very short time, and they were absolutely beautiful. One was from a woman who had her own wool, made her own wool. Another girl was Russian, and she put in stitches that were particular to her ancestry. So I just set up a Facebook page and put a call out, and women just took it on board, and there were little squares coming in from all over, like America, England. A lot of women had a connection. Their mother was born home, a father, an aunt who given up a baby, or a baby was taken from them in a home. So the project just evolved, and I was very lucky that the National Collective of Community-Based Women's Networks took on board the project, and they have 17 groups around Ireland. So a lot of women were making in groups. And then the blanket actually ended up being brought to Tuam and laid out on the burial site, carried onto the site by the survivors of these children and the families. And we had a beautiful ancient midwife ceremony. And I felt, it wasn't my project. I felt like I was just a caretaker for this. So it was very, very emotional, very powerful. But I think I always start off with just a little idea, and it just evolves. I don't sort of make plans for a 3-year project. I think I wouldn't be able to. It would just overwhelm me. I would be frightened, So they're just little seeds that just sort of grow.
I will add the picture and the video later on. You think it's just a blanket, but it's not. And it's even was emotional because a lot of women go through losing a child, or even men. My mom, she lost her first child she miscarried 6 months. And I remember 2 years ago, I asked her that, Mom, how do you feel? Do you want to talk about it? And I felt like she never really grieved. And it's something that still she's carrying with herself. And that's why maybe when I saw you did that project, it was very inspiring. And I felt like, so doing a ritual, it's very powerful and it's very healing.
Yes, and like every person that sent squares had a story or a little note. And the important thing I think about that was it gave people in Ireland a voice where they wouldn't have a political voice, or they weren't activists. So in our culture, and probably in a lot of cultures, when a woman was expecting a baby, her knitted. I knitted for family members who were having new babies, and you gave a gift of a little coat or a blanket or something. So it was quite traditional in that way. And one of the women who was actually there, who made a specific square, has 2 brothers that were in Tuam, and nobody knows where they are. And her mother was in Tuam, in the Mother and Child Institution, and she did a beautiful square. So I actually felt very humbled, and I didn't feel I was a spokesperson for the survivors, the families. I just felt I was a caretaker for this project. Yeah, so there were 796 children and babies that this lady, Catherine Corliss, discovered were born at Tuam, and they're all missing. So nobody knows where they are, and they think they're buried in the ground. So each square that a woman in Ireland knitted was for a child, We didn't have specific name like this. We didn't name the square for the child, but that was the general sort of idea. Does that make sense?
It is. It's something is very interesting to me is that healing can be very personal. Like I can have some trauma or something from the past that I need to heal from. And also we have a collective healing. So there is something happened in nation or to specific people. And what you did, you just work on the collective healing. And that's amazing. I really admire you.
And you see, Nazreen, like I didn't analyze any of that. It's very much intuition and being brave and thinking this project is going to work out, and wherever it ends up is where it's meant to be. So when I started that, I did not know it was going to be laid out at the burial site. I think I very much try not to think, if that makes sense. Something comes to me. Something comes to me and I just go, okay, I'm going to work with this and see what happens. And it works. And it's not that, I plan it all, but things just come in and I know this is the right way for this to go, so it ends up. So I think that, I suppose, is maybe really letting go of the ego and, thinking, oh, I want this on display in some, major museum. It's like, oh, this has been offered. Yes, say yes. This will be lovely, And I think that if you have a sort of a truth about your work, or you want a sense of purity and truth, that will happen. You allow it to happen.
Yeah, I totally understand what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at your work when we were in the other project, and I just love it. It's just absolutely beautiful. You're inspiring. And I felt very, I know not who you are, but I know what your work is coming from,
Yeah. Thank you. Now we're talking about your social engaged projects. Let's talk about the Mandala with a healing ceremony.
So at the time that came into the news about the scandal of women's healthcare and the cervical smear tests, I was really angry like everybody else. But I was also going through some issues myself at the time. So I was going for smear tests and some minor surgeries and that. And I was very frightened, not that I was sick like some of the women became, but I knew how I was feeling about it all. And I just decided I had something, and I'm not a very brave person. I'm quite shy. So I wouldn't, feel I would be very able to, sort of stand up for things. So I know my gift is my art and my creativity. So I decided that I would set up a project where, again, people could make an A4 page to say something about the smear test scandal. And at the time, it was 221 women who were diagnosed as terminally ill because of the mishandling of their smears. Yes. So I decided to use this ancient symbol of the downward triangle, which represents the woman, the feminine part of the woman. And then red was to represent our blood as women, and the gold was to represent honoring us, like, that we were to be honored as women in the highest form, which hadn't happened in our healthcare system. So I just made up a little diagram to instruct people how to do their piece, and then they could put whatever they wanted on it. And again, that just took off, and we had a lot of contributors to that. And I ended up in Rua Red Art Centre in Tala with Karen again, doing a healing ceremony, and we laid it out. The whole piece was laid out in a beautiful mandala. So when you see all the pieces together, it just looks lovely. I mean, a lot of the pieces, there was a lot of anger in them about what had happened, and that was okay. It was whatever you wanted to say on your piece of work. And one of the women had actually died at that stage, Emma Vic Mahuna. So my piece was about her, and that was in the center. Yeah, so just thinking about who I am, what can I do, what are my gifts? I have to do something. So and this is how it evolves.
And that's your power.
Yes. Thank you.
It is. I mean, it's okay to be shy. I mean, it doesn't mean that you are powerful, and because you bring that to your art, and also you engage other people to participate. Not many artists have that, and that's your power.
And that's so good to hear, because I'm actually quite shy and not confident, and would have a lot of, oh, who am I to do this, you know? And so it is about, yeah, stepping into your power, and you can do that in a quiet, gentle way, and also about honoring your gifts.
Yeah, exactly. Some people are activists, and I never saw it in myself that I want to do that, but I do have a voice, and I do want to communicate that voice, and don't want to just be silent and say nothing. And I do it through art, and I think you do it through art, and that's beautiful.
Yes, and I felt at the time, especially of the Tune Babies, like, well, I don't have a voice. I'm not a politician. I'm not a journalist. You know what? Like, how can I say how I feel about this? And so that's, I think, how many people, especially women, felt at the time. And sadly, you know, that's still not resolved. Yeah, because I do feel I'm not a spokesperson, and I wouldn't like to offend people who are, you know, directly connected to these issues. So, you know, there is always this fear that somebody's going to go, oh, who do you think you are, you know? So you have to just come from a place of kindness and purity. And
I don't believe there is somebody more important than you or another person. We create those concepts. Everybody can talk, everybody can express themselves, and we just forget how much power we have.
Yeah, it's our conditioning. We don't step into it. Yeah,
exactly.
It's about just empowering other people as well through creativity, have that voice, you know. I mean, there's lots of other ways they can do it as well, but
I read something on your website. You were talking about transitioning from artist to shaman, and from shaman to artist. What do you mean by that?
So I think that's to do definitely with when I'm painting, that I feel that I've become this very ancient sort of energy, that it's not that I leave my body or anything, but I feel I just tap into this connection to the land. Like the Burren would be one of my very special places to be, and it's very inspiring to paint, and you know, but I feel like that I go back to this very ancient sort of energy, like I could be in a cave really. And that's what channels the painting. So it's not about me, Barbara, the artist. It's just about this energy that I feel that comes into the work, and I go with it and allow it. And I love stones, and I have stones all over the house. And I can't go on a beach without coming home with stones. And I remember, then I look at them and I think that's the stone I got here. So I think when I went to Burren for the very first time many years ago, and to be on those rocks, it was just like, wow. And to think about the people who would have been there and survived there, and it was just so raw and, you know, just so powerful, this energy. And so I think when I'm at my best painting, that's the place I go to.
I went to the Burren And I thought, I just like this place. I mean, it's just, I feel so connected. But now when talking about it, I feel like maybe there is some sort of energy there that it's very strong, and I wasn't even aware of what's going on. I just felt like I really, really like this place.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think you just absorb something there that comes into your psyche, really. And um it's very primitive in a way, you know, so unspoilt, and you can be very alone there. So I think you do just tap into that, you know, ancient history of humans.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very beautiful place. If anybody who lives in Ireland and didn't go and visit that place,
Go.
go.
Yeah. And actually to swim in the Atlantic as well, you know, the movement of the Atlantic Ocean is just so powerful, and that always inspires me as well. And sometimes I take the seawater and I use that to paint with, you know, especially in the watercolors. So it's sort of bringing the land and the energy into the work.
Oh, I like that.
Thank you.
If you agree, we could talk about some of your paintings.
Yes. Yeah, so this is a very recent piece. And I woke up one morning and the news in Ireland was just devastating. There was news about COVID and the lockdown. There was news about the final report of the mother and child investigation, which was not good. There was news about the cervical smear tests, and I just thought, I just despair for women and for Ireland, and I just felt like I was unraveling and that we were all unraveling. So that's what that painting is about.
There's something about this piece, and I do really like. What is this one is about? Called elderly woman cocooning.
Yeah, so this was at the beginning of lockdown when older people were not allowed to leave their homes. Oh, yeah. And there was a lot of articles in the media and on the news about like beautiful elderly couples who were separated because one of them was sick. There was one particular woman whose husband was in hospital and died, and she couldn't see him. She couldn't go to the funeral. She, you know, I saw her being interviewed, and it was just so emotional. And so there's a complete separation in that painting. So half the woman is in this white, grey, stark area, and then the other part, she's trying to connect with the blood, the living, you know. So it was a number of different stories I read about elderly people that were just harrowing, and you know, I just wanted to express that.
So this called Flowers for Loved Ones.
Yes. So again, this was to do with COVID-19 and people who are dying or people who are in hospital. And again, I was just traumatized like everybody, and I wanted to do something. And I thought, what can I do? There's nothing I can do. And I had painted a flower from my garden for someone. And then I realized that's what I'll do. So I just, again, put out an open call on social media. Anybody who was suffering through COVID or had loved ones suffering through COVID to message me, and I would pick a flower from my garden, meditate on the person if I had their first name, paint the flower and post it online because we couldn't, you know, meet or anything like that. So it was a free thing and I had a lot of requests. I had nursing frontline staff in America, somebody who'd lost their mum who was actually living in Australia and couldn't come home. people who are ill in hospital. So it was very deep, because I would go out, think about the person and the request, pick a specific flower, and then paint it immediately, thinking about the person, and then post it online. So I felt I was doing something then to connect, to heal, because if you did go and visit somebody in hospital in the old days, you brought flowers.
Yeah.
So it was just a way of feeling I could help in a creative way.
But you just, by doing that, you create connection and give love. Because if I just connect with you and you paint a flower for me, I feel special. I feel like somebody is caring, and that's a beautiful thing you did.
I can't remember the specific people now. I have a note of everybody, but there was a beautiful elderly man from the traveling community who died. Now that one I read about in the paper. So I picked some wild dandelions that were in my garden, because of the wisdom that man would have had was gone. And the thing was, nobody could go to the funerals. There were no funerals, so you couldn't honor the person. So the girl who lived in Australia, her mum died, nobody could go and talk to her, she couldn't come home. So it was also saying, I hear about your mum, I'm honoring her, here's a flower. It was quite emotional as well.
Yeah. Serge is one of the images that is in your book.
Yes. Yeah, so I would have actually painted that a long time before I started doing the ancestral shamanic work. And it's about me, that's really me in that bubble of water, but I'm being propelled into a wave or the atmosphere. I don't know. And I don't know whether I'm imprisoned in the bubble or whether I'm protected. So a lot of my work would be like that. I don't have the answers, but I know that there's something very powerful in that piece.
So yeah, you're right. Sometimes it's not easy to talk about.
Yeah.
And to be honest, sometimes we don't want to, because we want to.
And this is the thing.
Yeah, we want the viewer have their own story or whatever they feel, and if we say the story, then we kind of limited their imagination.
Yeah. And I think that one also would have been after my father died, which would have been, would have brought up a lot of past trauma about grief and loss for me. So I really was just not purging, but the work was just coming out of me and I was just going with it,
Yeah. Even though it looks like you're in a bubble, but for me, it's like you're pushing and you are ready to fly. It's something powerful. It's even though the posture is leaning, but it's like pushing from the back, and it just want to free itself.
I suppose at the time, Serge would have been connected to the Atlantic and the waves, and when you're in the water and a wave comes in and just carries you up with it, and you've no control.
I found the word. It's like a goddess.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I do think we are all goddesses. I see that in all women.
I'm gonna find another picture here. Artist as shaman.
Yeah, this is very interesting, really, because it's quite personal, actually, because after the birth of my second daughter, I became very ill, and I had sort of life-changing health issues, and so my body changed. So because of medication and that, my figure changed and became a much fuller version of myself. And I absolutely hated getting my photograph taken or being in photos because I was quite young and I really changed, you know, and people didn't recognize me. So it took me a very, very long time to honor my body again. And this photo was taken by Martha Fay, photographer, and it was telling my story. So my story is actually linked to the photo, about honoring myself again as a beautiful woman and a goddess. And I went away on a women's weekend with the moon and all, and we all had to dress up as goddesses and take photos of ourselves and like them. And I was absolutely dreading it. And that was sort of very healing for me to do it, you know. And then this portrait was taken, and just about honoring myself and loving myself. So yeah, so there's a lot of personal stuff behind that, and I put it out there, which was huge, because even my Facebook page, I don't think had a photo of me for years, you know. So,
you know, Barbara, it's part of our conditioning and what society tell us what is beautiful. We believe that a story. This image, for me, every time I look at it, I do really connect with it. There is something in that face that it's say, I am beautiful and she is beautiful. It's saying to me that accept who I am. If you didn't have it inside you, that I am okay with who I am and I love myself and I am beautiful, then I couldn't see that in that image.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, I agree. I think it was the right time, you know, and I think when you ask older people about, you know, their regrets, I think, you know, that's one of them, that they didn't honor their youth and their health. And, you know, so I went through a lot of my 30s and 40s sort of, you know, just not confident really, you know, feeling sort of judged. But I did a lot of work on myself, and I think also not passing that on to my own daughters, that was very powerful. So I empowered them, you know, in a different way. So that was good.
Yeah.
That's the whole feminist thing now as well, I think. And I think that it just took me a long time to regain that, because I would have had it before I became ill. But I always tell you, I always feel beautiful in the water. When I'm swimming, I feel like a mermaid, you know. So maybe I'm just in the wrong element. I should be in the water, not on land.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I love water too. Is there anything I didn't ask you and you would like to talk about it?
No, I think that was wonderful, Nazreen. I think I'd love to meet you and connect.
Yeah, I have this feeling that I wanna hold you right now.
Yeah. I think I think that was really lovely.
Before we end our conversation, I want you to give our listener, whoever watch it on YouTube, about your workshop and where they can find you. And I know that you have an online store, so give that information to our viewer.
Thank you. So my website is www.barbaraomearaartist.com. I'm also on Facebook, Barbara O'Meara Artist. I think there's something very interesting coming up for Culture Night, a collaboration with some other artists for Centre for Creative Practices. And then I hope to get back to my physical workshops this autumn, which will be in North Wicklow, South Dublin area, and will be connected to nature. I had one planned for last year. I'm hoping to get that off the ground. And then my paintings for sale on my website, as well as Soul's book.
So they can buy your work on both Facebook and your website.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
You have a beautiful soul, and I'm honored to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nazreen.